There appears to be a rift in our culture concerning the idea of what does it mean to be a man. Conversations about toxic masculinity and the Me Too movement and general social and technological change have all contributed to this rift, and from my observations, it seems like there are multiple different factions competing indirectly for dominance in this cultural space. And for a lot of young men, and I would put myself in this bucket, it's actually important to have an answer to the question, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a mature adult in today's society? I'm going to show you clips of 3 individuals who are, I believe, embodiments of these so-called factions: Kevin Samuels, Hasan Piker, and Jordan Peterson. But first, I want to show you this video of what I would call the primordial response to the deconstruction of masculinity, so to speak.
Over the years, I have personally learned a lot about alpha males, how they operate, how and why they do things the way that they do, and what makes girls go absolutely crazy for them. And as you begin to understand these things, you should be able to apply some of them to your own life and change the way that you do things so that you can get better results. Number 1, alpha males hide their feelings. One of the craziest things that I ever learned about alpha males is that you can never really know how they feel about you. Something that drives girls absolutely insane. Even in long-term relationships, you always want to remain slightly aloof or a little bit mysterious to keep them guessing as to how you truly feel about them.
Now, in my opinion, this is terrible advice, and this guy's whole channel, who has 1 million+ subscribers and hundreds of thousands of views on his videos, which are basically the same shallow and generic talking points over and over again. This is what happens when the idea of traditional masculinity is deconstructed so much so that people are lost and they just go to whatever first internet video they find about how to get girls, which the reason I call these types of videos, and there's a lot of channels that do this type of stuff, but the reason I call these videos the primordial response to the masculinity crisis, let's say, is because it's entirely based on appealing to the most primordial instinct in men, which is sexual attraction.
What you're about to learn are some of the hidden skills that only players have, and if becoming attractive and knowing how to act around girls is important to you, then you definitely don't want to miss this.
Now, sprinkled in these videos is some actual good advice, like the idea that a man is someone who self-validates. You shouldn't look for validation in other people. That's reasonable advice, regardless of what you think of these videos. But this leads into the second so-called faction that I want to talk about, who I think is best embodied by a man named Kevin Samuels, who has amassed a huge following very quickly, probably for the fact that he makes a ton of videos like this.
What works for a couple works for a couple. I can't.
Shut the fuck up, Lonnie Love. I've been wanting to say that for a minute. Shut up. I and men like myself absolutely don't care what your swole up ass has to say about anything.
Now, whatever your reaction to that video is, it's hard to deny that that's certainly a spectacle, and it's no wonder that people are at least shocked and interested in watching stuff like that. Kevin Samuels embodies, I think, what you might call the red pill community, or the men going their own way, or the manosphere. Communities that emphasize a, I would say, solidified retreat into traditional masculinity roles, the idea of complete independence, pure hustle culture, the grind, all of that. I would say that the advice he gives is a few steps above the advice given in those far from average videos, in that he emphasizes self-improvement, which is a good thing, and not doing it just for the sake of sexual attraction, although he probably could word it a little better.
But if you are doing your work, following your why, your life will be fulfilling enough to where you can, whatever you attract, you'll attract like-minded people, and you'd be surprised that women are even drawn to that. But it doesn't have to, women should not be the reason. They should be the add-on. They're the helpmeet. They're there to be, I hate to use this term, but I will. They're an add-on for you.
And despite his maybe abrasive demeanor and choice of words, he does give genuinely good advice that if you're a young man in today's society and you don't really have much direction, some of what Kevin Samuels says is genuinely good advice to follow.
First thing, I'm big on therapy. But if you're not in a position where you don't have a lot of money right now, every company you work for has an employee assistance line. You need somebody to talk to. We're not in a church like we used to be. Find someone who's a consultant pro bono. Second, he's working full-time at a fast food place? Mm-hmm. Good, I need you to have another part-time job. Because you're making $14 an hour at McDonald's, you can go over to On Q or Circle K or a convenience store and make another $14 an hour. See, men, we have to work. I cannot hear that I'm broke and then you're only working 40 hours a week. That does not compute with me.
Now, that's not particularly comprehensive advice. It's very formulaic. Work more, get your stuff together, and that has its uses. But Kevin Samuels loses me, especially, when he makes claims about the general moral character of what he calls high-value men. Men that make a lot of money and can afford to do whatever they want, so to speak.
Let's get into it, ladies. Let's get into it, because now the scales have been removed from some of your eyes to where you understand that there are no perfect men. And the higher up a man goes, the more options he has. And it is natural and human to want to exercise those options. I said it. Men who sit around talking about they walk this moral path are lying to you more often than not.
Now, call me a hopeful idealist, but I like to think that a real man does not cheat on his long-term romantic partner, but that's up for you to decide. The next iteration of masculinity we'll look at is, I think, best embodied by Hasan Piker. He represents what I call postmodern masculinity, which is sort of the opposite of what Kevin Samuels preaches. The postmodern man is all about rejecting masculine stereotypes and not focusing inward so much as it is looking outward and questioning social norms and trying to look at things through a political lens in order to enact change.
It's this ridiculous approach to mental health that men have. Like, again, it's because as a boy, you're supposed to suck it the fuck up. You're a man. You're supposed to, when you're hurt, you're not supposed to admit it. That's where this fucking comes from. But then when you counter that with like, yeah, we should have mental health therapy for men and men should have support groups and blah, blah, blah. Then people turn around and go, oh, well, they're pussies. Like, they should be able to deal with it on their own. Like, so you're reinforcing the same fucking systems that literally put you in this position to begin with. Men's issues can be very perfectly encaptured under class issues. Okay, there is a increasing suicide rate amongst men. Like, it's a huge fucking problem. A lot of that can directly relate back to the issues that they face under their class position.
Now, as with Kevin Samuels, I agree with some of that advice and I disagree with some of it. I don't think couching everything in political terms is a particularly useful way to go about analyzing or solving one's personal issues. I think a lot of progress can be made in any individual's life, independent of large-scale social transformation. I also think one particular flaw of postmodern masculinity, and this may be unique to Hasan, but I tend to think it's a broader issue in general, is that it's somewhat contradictory and inherently hypocritical. You can't reject masculine stereotypes and then talk about how you still embody them, and even though you recognize the contradiction there, it doesn't matter.
I still get very Turkish and traditionally masculine when it comes to the bill. I usually like spending the money, not because I need to show them that I'm like spending the money and I'm a big baller or whatever, but you know, I do sometimes assume that more traditional role of caretaker, I guess, which is, I guess, antithetical to being a leftist or whatever. But that's my perspective, and it's outdated, and I don't give a shit.
And I'm showing this next clip because I just don't like Hasan, and I think he actually is more aligned to that primordial reaction than he would admit.
Don't be overzealous, don't be entitled, and don't try to manipulate girls into having sex with you. So the fuckboy mode that I engaged here, or fuckboy or fuckgirl mode here, is that you can have your red receipts on. Now this is a fucking big secret, okay? This is a big bad secret that I'm telling you. This is something that you can do to show people that you, oh shit, I was too busy, I couldn't get back to you in time, I'm so sorry. And it is manipulative, and I totally understand, but it goes off of exactly what I was talking about before as far as scarcity.
As far as scarcity. It's so cringy. To his credit, though, he does have a huge audience, and if he draws people in with that kind of weird shit, but then he also offers them this next piece of advice, maybe he's a net positive.
True masculine, or like whatever positive quality that you want to attribute to men and women as well, vice versa, comes from confidence, okay? Inner peace that you have found within yourself because you know what your limitations are, you know what your goals are, you can set goals for yourself, and you can achieve them. You believe in yourself, you have inner peace, okay? It's very difficult to accomplish. It's easier said than done, 100%.
So if the red pill community goes too traditional and the postmodern man gets too detached from masculinity, then the reasonable middle ground, I think, is best embodied by someone like Jordan Peterson. He does solidly ground himself in the fact that there are, let's say, differences between men and women, and that those differences are relevant in determining for each individual what the primary source of meaning in one's life might be. But I think he's doing so from a legitimate clinical psychological perspective as well as a scientific perspective.
Well, that's for men. Women have their sets of responsibilities. They're not the same because they're complicated, because women, of course, have to take primary responsibility for having infants at least, but then also for caring for them. They're structured differently than men for biological necessity, even if it's not a psychological issue, and it's also partly a psychological issue. Women know what they have to do. Men have to figure out what they have to do. And if they have nothing worth living for, then they stay Peter Pan. And why the hell not?
But even though he says stuff like this, he's certainly not embroiled in the alpha male obsession of the red pill community and others, even by Hasan Piker's own estimation.
By someone like Jordan Peterson, who does cry from time to time. The outdated, antiquated way of like thinking about masculine features does not apply to Jordan Peterson.
And if I were to show one clip that I think best encapsulates Jordan Peterson's message about what it means to be not just a man, but a mature adult, I think it's this one.
Because you might ask, what could you do to improve yourself? Well, let's step one step backwards. The first question might be, why should you even bother improving yourself? And I think the answer to that is something like, so you don't suffer any more stupidly than you have to. And maybe so others don't have to either. It's something like that. You know, like there's a real injunction at the bottom of it. It's not some casual self-help doctrine. It's that if you don't organize yourself properly, you'll pay for it, and in a big way, and so will the people around you. So you get your act together so that there isn't any more stupid pain around you than necessary. Well, so then the question might be, well, how would you go about getting your act together? And the answer to that, and this is a phenomenological idea too, it's something like, look around for something that bothers you and see if you can fix it.
Look around for something that bothers you and see if you can fix it. This is the fundamental message that Jordan Peterson imparts, and it's one that I think is particularly useful. It's been useful for me and obviously many millions of others. It's the same idea that is part of the meme of clean your room. That's why that meme is around in the first place. For a lot of young men and women in today's society, which is deteriorating rapidly and putting a lot of pressure on people, especially around my age, I'm 24, and I imagine for a lot of people in their mid-20s, that's a period of a lot of personal transformation. The simple but philosophically sophisticated advice of, if you don't know what to do to improve yourself, look around and try and solve a problem that you're capable of solving is actually very useful advice. Like for me, the whole reason I started these videos is because 8 or 9 months ago, whenever I posted the first one, there was all kinds of political tension, the Black Lives Matter riots were going on, the Trump and Biden election was happening, and all of my dumbass friends on Facebook and social media were calling each other fascists or communists or racists, and it's like, well, wait a second, I've spent many hundreds, if not thousands of hours over the course of my 24 years at least trying to understand these ideologies to the point where maybe it would be beneficial if I spoke up and tried to create some common ground between what appeared to be complete, enemies, so that when my friends of different opposing ideologies would get together, it wasn't awkward, because it's like, how can you say that anyone who votes for Trump is a fascist, terrible person and then go hang out with them? It's like, anyway, that is my experience with what does it mean to be a mature adult. It means taking on responsibility. It means looking at your own problems and trying to address them, but more so addressing the problems that are within your immediate vicinity of control. And I don't pretend that I'm moving mountains with these videos, but I'm trying to say what I believe to be true as honestly as I can, and I'm hoping, and it seems to have some positive effect, at least for some people. So, with that, good luck and Godspeed.